Hi, I'm Steve Moriarty. I represent myself as Moriarty's Gem Art. We're a jeweler on the square. Both me and my wife Nancy developed this starting in about 1983. No, it was 85, I think. And we also have 4 websites, which includes MoreGems.com, TanzaniteJewelryDesigns.com, Opals.com, and MothersFamilyRings.com. Most of those are pretty self-explanatory what we sell. And we do sell both jewelry and loose stones. I started in the business in 1975. At that time, I traveled for my brother, Tom, and we wholesaled to jewelers around the Midwest. I carried loose stones and mountings, and I would design for jewelers on the spot, and we'd build them a piece of jewelry. So from there, I got into the retail business, but before that I started cutting, which cutting is what I really enjoy to do. And in front of me here is the cutting machine, and we'll talk a little about it. when I started traveling overseas, I started going to Germany because Germany were known as the finest cutters in the world. I bought colored stones from them, and from there, as I started to learn that they weren't actually cutting everything, they were being cut in Bangkok, Thailand. I started going to Thailand, and I did that for several years. And then a friend of mine, we got to know each other real well, was Jim Fiebig, and we started traveling to Africa. We went to Tanzania, next to Madagascar, which we went there for about 10 years straight. He actually moved there for a while. Then I went back to Tanzania, and I think the near future is going to Ethiopia for opal. So today we're going to show you a little bit about the faceting machine, and I'm going to do a little cutting. This is a faceting machine. This is an Alpha Taurus. Very good machine. Does very high precision cutting. And what I'm cutting today is an apatite. This comes from Madagascar. This gem, not commonly available. It very sporadic. In my entire time of the business, there's been 3 strikes of these large apatites that came out of Madagascar. And I've bought quite a bit of material. It is a rare stone, and unfortunately a very difficult stone to polish. Most cutters don't want to touch it. I've finally gotten the technique down, but it is still a problem stone. It can take twice as long to polish apatite as any other gem. So the faceting machine basically is the mass that holds the head. The stone is attached with epoxy to a dop stick, which comes out here. This is a dop stick. So you glue it to the dop stick, put it in the machine, and the machine has angle from 0 to 90 degrees, and it has rotational index, which is back here. This particular index is a 96 index, and it's numbered and keyed. So with the combination of the index and the angle, you get the facets that are in the gem. This particular gem will be about a 10 karat apatite. Apatite comes commonly to 2 or 3 carat, but large sizes like this only came from this one source in Madagascar.
Steve, someone wants to know if you've ever tried an Australian faceting machine, such as the VJ.
I do not know what the VJ is. There's a lot of new machines coming out because the old machines, the guys have gotten old or have had issues making money, and they've quit manufacturing. This machine is no longer manufactured. Most of the machines I've ever used are no longer manufactured, and there's some new machines coming out. So I'm not real aware of the machines. I have Facetron, and the Facet are the 2 other machines I have. So those are the only ones I'm familiar with. Ultratech is the one that many people use and is still manufactured. So, try not to lose my train of thought with these questions, but feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here about. That's why we're live streaming, and any questions you might have, just throw them in and I'll try and answer what I can. So the machine, we use diamond laps to do the cutting. This particular lap is pretty fine, but that's only because I preformed this apatite, so I can use a much finer lap to finish cutting it. So the Q-lit angle for apatite is 41 degrees, so you generally, most of the facets stay within a few degrees of that. And you set the index. This I'm on 1 and 95 is going to produce the 2 facets that make the Q-lit. And what makes apatite so difficult to cut is it just doesn't polish. You get terrible scratches in it and deep scratches that are tough to remove. sometimes you just don't feel you can get them out. And that's why this stone I started cutting probably 6 months ago and finally just kind of gave up on it. But with persistence, we can even finish an apatite. So this is a finished apatite. And this particular stone is a 10.98 carat. These are usually heat treated. They're heated after you cut them, because you cut out most of the things that would break or expand and crack in the stone, and they're heated, and you can heat them to this more green color as is this stone, or if you heat it a little more, it'll go blue. And if you make the mistake or the oven goes a little too far, it ends up colorless, which I have a few colorless stones, which are not what you want. The blues and the greens are beautiful stones. They look much like the tourmalines, the Paraiba tourmalines. And Paraiba tourmaline in a 10 carat stone can be $30,000-$40,000 a carat, when apatite is only $100, $150 a carat. But the big difference is the tourmaline's wearable in a ring, whereas the apatite you can only do pendants in it because it's just not hard enough.
Steve, somebody wants to know what the average investment for a faceting machine and probably the equipment for a beginner is.
So we have a question is what's the cost of the setup to get started faceting? And because all the lesser expensive machines are kind of off the market now, I think we're looking at anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to get into a complete setup for faceting. The facet, like I own, just the machine's about $5,000 now. So you end up with another $500 to $1,000 in equipment with the laps and all the other tools that you need. There are some used equipment you can find on eBay, but used equipment is a problem, which I know well because I bought a used piece of equipment when I started faceting. And if you don't know machinery, the problem is that you don't know if the machine's right, and my machine was not right, because when you cut, now I'll cut a facet, and when I come back to polish it, I'll use a different lap, and you would like it just to put it down and it be exactly where it's supposed to be, but my machine was never right. So I had to cheat. You have a cheater on this machine where you can make the quill go just slight off angle, and everything I had to cheat. So, but I thought that was normal. But as a used piece of equipment, you just don't know whether it's right or not. So I recommend to buy a new piece of equipment. The one thing it did for me is cheating is really good when you have to repair stones, and I'm very good at cheating just because that's what I had to do with every facet on every stone was cheat it, and we don't want to cheat.
Somebody else asked, do you find it more difficult to cut heat-treated stones?
Well, sometimes the question is, I don't know, can they hear what the question is?
They can see it in the chat.
Oh, okay. So the question is it more difficult to cut heat-treated stones? In some cases it is, particularly sapphire, because I can identify a sapphire. When I cut it on a coarser lap, you can see that it's just chipping out. You can see deep holes where you're cutting, whereas a unheated stone cuts smooth and is much easier to polish. To have to polish out all those little chips is much more difficult, and those chips are caused from the heating. They're heated so high that it's almost to the melting point, and it does make the structure of the sapphire a little less durable. So heat-treated sapphires are less durable. They will chip easier than stones that aren't heated. So sometimes that's true, but other times it has a little effect on how you cut. So you want to show another stone here, Michael? Well, I was talking about heat treating. That's the only problem with these questions. I'll kind of lose where I was, but I'll keep rambling on. So here's a Tanzanite, and Tanzanite's always been a specialty. I love Tanzania. Tanzania's great because I have a friend that owns a mine in the mining area, and the mining area is fenced off to keep people out. But because I know somebody, I get to go in and I get to deal with all the miners that are in there, go to where they eat lunch, and a lot of them have stones, and you can buy directly from the miners. So I do love Tanzanite. I love Tanzania. Tanzanite's interesting, particularly when you cut it, because it is also heated, and it doesn't look anything like the color you're seeing in this picture when you start it. I mean, it's kind of brownish. It's often not very pretty till you heat it. So it is kind of exciting to cut one, heat it, and see what you end up with. So Tanzanite is not only a beautiful stone, it's one of my favorite stones to cut. And generally you do cut them first and heat them later. So the question about cutting heat-treated stones is often you're cutting them first and then heating them later, so there's no effect there. So this is almost a 10-carat gem, and the color, the deep saturation of the color is what we're after in Tanzanite. Deep is not the only concern. What the colors are, as you see in this, it's a nice violet blue color. This stone will change colors in different lights, more blue in daylight, more violet in incandescent, and it's that mix of color that makes it a very desirable stone, because this particular color is not duplicated in any other gem. Would be a Tanzanite. Cut a 120 carat Tanzanite, and it's probably the most valuable stone. 120 carat at 800 a carat is $96,000 or something like that now. At the time it was less expensive, but still a $50,000 gem. So I think that's probably the most expensive I've cut, and I've cut several over 100 carats. And one of the worst things that's happened to me was a 120 carat Tanzanite, because we say that we like our Tanzanites dark, and I never thought there was over dark, but I cut a 120 carat Tanzanite and it was black as coal. Not an exciting moment when you pull it out of the oven and you can see no blue at all. That stone I recut to a 70 carat, so I lost 50 carats before it finally got to just a beautiful sapphire blue stone. So that's, there's always risks in heat treating. Heat treating is something you'd rather not do, but unfortunately most colored gems, you do have to heat treat them. You're either altering the color, or you're often removing a color. As in Tanzanite, you're removing yellow from it and leaving just the blue and the purple in the gem. Sapphires, you're generally altering the color. They can be altered from just a gray looking hazy stone to a beautiful blue color. They used to call it Gouda. And in the early 80s, the Sri Lankans were wondering why the Thais were buying all of this material that seemed to be worthless. And later they'd find out that heating it, the Thais were heating it and taking a worthless gem and making something worth thousands of dollars. So heat treating is part of the business, and without it, we would have very few gems to sell, because heating is such a required part of selling colored gems. Most stones are heat treated. Very few come out naturally. Most garnets are natural, but many, many other stones are heat treated. So After Tanzanite, probably my favorite gem is opals. I used to deal in Australian opal, but very little. There was just not a lot available for the last 20 years. That was exciting. The sizes weren't great. But then in 2008, Ethiopia started producing opal. And what opals they produce. I mean, huge stones. We have stones up to 80 carats. And the colors that are in them, a full rainbow of color. Australia say that the reds are the most valued because for the last 10 years they had almost nothing red. Everything was greens, no reds to their stones. So it's the most valuable color. But in Ethiopian opal, it's common and common to see stones that have all colors of the rainbow, including blues and violets and indigos that you almost never see in opals. So opal's exciting. You'll hear more and more about Ethiopian opal over the years. It's very new. People aren't aware of it, but people are starting to get aware of it because of the big size, the beautiful colors, and it is the most durable of all the opals. It's hard. It does not craze because it likes water. It'll take on water and release water with no problem, whereas Australian opal, if they're not dry enough, when they dry out, they end up crazing, which is little cracks in them that makes them near worthless. So, question, Michael?
Yeah, someone wants to know if over time you've created any of your own designs or found different angles on certain stones that work better than others.
Well, I personally, a lot of people cut from books or cut from people's design, and my preference is just to start with a stone and start cutting, because when you cut from design, you end up losing weight. The design is not necessarily made to fit that piece of rough, and so if you have the ability to just free cut, meaning just sit there and decide what to make out of this stone, you're much better off. You'll get much better yields out of material than following designs. It's much more difficult, but much more rewarding, because every time you do a cut, you get something different. And if you look at our video on cutting the 570 carat quartz, that's a design that I just sat down and just started to cut, and you're always wondering if it's going to be a beautiful stone or not, but it just came out amazing. If you follow using the correct angles, which there are specific angles that you have to stick with, at least for the culet. I mean, they're pretty much published angles, and usually somewhere around 41 degrees. And beyond that, you try and keep everything above critical angle. And I just found it better to just cut what I see rather than cutting by a design in a book. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're cutting expensive materials, the difference between, just cutting a carat extra in a Tanzanite, is another $400 or $500. And so you really try not to waste extra material. And if you cut from design, you'll waste material. So, do the opal, Mike? So here's an Ethiopian opal. And the cool thing about Ethiopian opal is not only its durability, the beauty of the colors, a lot of it has high transparency. So like this stone, you can facet the gem. Most opals are cut in cabochon, meaning they're flat on the back and they have a dome top. But these are faceted like you do other gems. And it just creates something totally unique, nothing we've ever seen really before in opal. Not that it hasn't happened before, because Mexican opal has high transparency and you can facet it, but these are so transparent. Not only do you get the play of color, we know as fire, you also get color off the facets that you're producing from the pavilion. You'll get red flashes that have nothing to do with fire. It has to do with the body color of the opal and the faceting that's reflecting that body color. So the opals of Ethiopia are totally unique. It is my next trip will be to Ethiopia. I love the opal, but not only that, they've recently discovered emerald, which was last December or just sometime late last year, I bought my first piece in February in Tucson from one of Opal suppliers I use, and it just cut a beautiful stone. And the unique thing about it is not treated. You know, there's no treatment to it at all. Not that you can't treat Ethiopian Opal, but because it came straight from the mine to me, I didn't treat it, and there was no treatment involved, and very clean material. So it's an exciting new source. And just recently, I've heard reports that they've just found sapphire there also. So 3 good reasons to go to Ethiopia. The opal's enough, but having a few other stones to see there is pretty exciting. So not getting much cutting done here, but you know, hopefully between now and the next time we do this, which should be this Friday, we're going to try and do another one of these live feeds. And we appreciate the questions that you ask, and hopefully it'll be educational for all of us.
You ever cut any gem grade aragonite or serpentine materials?
Gem grade aragonite. No.
That's what one fellow said they are cutting right now.
No, I don't know much about aragonite. I have bought a few crystals recently that came. Where'd those come from,
I don't know
Michael?
if it was Morocco, because they were with the Moroccan.
Yeah, maybe they're from Morocco. Yeah, I haven't cut them, so I don't know the material. Not even sure of the hardness. It's probably not very hard, but neither is apatite, but it makes a beautiful gem. So let me know how cutting aragonite goes, and maybe I'll try one someday.
About Australian Torrington emerald
Don't know that either. Torrington emerald, never heard of it.
from Australia.
Yeah, not familiar with it. So we here at More Gems and Moriarty's Gem Art, we specialize in colored stones. If you go on More Gems, you'll see quite a few of them. We have literally more than 1,000 gems here at the store. So we'd like to see you come by sometime and take a look of all the things we've got. And so, another question?
Yeah, you know, I misspoke. He says Antigorite.
No.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, there's a lot of unusual stones out there that I haven't cut. Many of them that shouldn't be cut because there are so many problems. You know, we've tried fluorite in the past and have had some success with fluorite, but finally you give up because of the low value of the stones and just the problems cutting. You know, I'm tired of trying to cut extremely difficult stones to cut. The apatite is tough enough. You know, I've bought a lot of apatite from people that tried cutting it that finally they said, I give up, you know, and fortunately I can cut it because it does produce such a beautiful gem that I'll continue to cut apatites. But, you know, there's a lot of stones I have no desire to cut, including calcite. There's people that cut calcite, and, you know, there's a lot of stones that just fall apart when you cut them. And, you know, it's always distressing when you have issues with a stone and something breaks after you put hours of times in it. So I'm looking for easier stones to cut is what I'm after. Quit all these difficult gems. You know, the things that are great to cut, I mean, garnets and barrels like the easiest thing to polish, and, you know, I love cutting those. And even sapphire in smaller sizes is very easy to deal with, particularly on heated material. But you know, the polishing end of it, it's always easy to cut, but polishing is always the difficulty in cutting gems.
Somebody wants to know, they found a small item that looks like a gemstone, but they're not sure whether it really has any value or what it is. How do they identify that?
Well, you can either send us a picture of it or bring it into the store, and we can generally identify most things that you may have. We did a video on identifying Tanzanite to describe some of the tools that we use, and some of them are inexpensive that you can buy. What was the name of that video, you remember, Mike? Or where they find it?
It should be under informational videos
On
our channel.
on the YouTube channel. So yeah, you can go to YouTube, and we have a lot of informational videos on there that you can go through and get some more information on identifying stones and how to cut. And we have several cutting videos, and we'll continue to do this and do a lot more instructional videos.
So Kimo wants to know, is there any restrictions when traveling and buying gemstones abroad to bring back to the U.S.?
There are all sorts of restrictions when you go overseas to buy. Ethiopia has restriction of bringing back rough. If you bring back a kilo of rough, you also have to bring back a kilo of cut stones, and the purpose of that is to keep the labor within the country. Originally they wanted to restrict all export of rough, but it hurt their economy so much that they opened it up. But they do want to create that cutting industry there in the country, which is how it should be. Tanzania has also done the same thing, particularly with Tanzanite. You can't export a piece of rough over 5 carat unless it has crystal shape. If it is a natural crystal or has 3 faces of a natural crystal, you can export it. So every country has its laws about export. Some countries don't allow export. Many things end up being smuggled out, which is true of Mozambique now. Madagascar has changed their laws so many times that you can be there and they can change it while you're there and say that you can't export. So you have to keep up on the laws. It helps to know people within the country, dealers that are there, to know exactly what the laws are. Many people smuggle out, but I don't want to be in a jail in Madagascar or Brazil or Tanzania. So best to know the laws and have somebody there that can help you with anything you may want to export. So.
Bigelow said he's getting antsy. He wants to see some cutting.
He wants to see some cutting. Well, go to the cutting videos because it's more time talking, and it's hard to talk and cut. I'm finding. Usually I'm quiet and concentrating, but just for you, Matt. So this process, cutting this apatite, is probably, for me, a 6-hour process. I'm fairly quick, so some people could spend 8, 10 hours, 20 hours on cutting a stone. The big quartz I cut took me probably 35 or 40 hours to cut, but that's just the size of it. The bigger the stone, the more time it takes to cut, and definitely the more time it takes to polish. And the harder the stone, like sapphires, you try and cut a large sapphire, and you'll find that it can take a lot of time just because of the hardness of the gem. And cutting's not something you really want to do while you're chatting, because one mistake can cost you dearly. Even apatite that's $100 a carat, you make a mistake and you easily lose a carat, because a bad mistake means totally starting to recut the stone from scratch, and then you're going to lose 10%, 20% of the weight that you started with. Cutting's a lot of looking. Cut a little, look a little. And we were talking about unique cuts, and many cuts have been from either making a mistake or running into an inclusion that's in a stone. Inclusion is anything you don't want to be there, something that's a crystal or a fracture. And when you run into those, sometimes you have to cut off a corner and you end up with some fancy shape that is not symmetrical. Or, I think the first one I ended up with was a 9-sided round. Usually they're even numbers, but just ran into a problem and it ended up a totally different cut, and it came out just fine. So a lot of new cuts are created by problems that we run into. I'm back. So in the last few years, there have been some new discoveries. Unfortunately, they were short-lived. The first one was Rwanda Amethyst, probably the nicest amethyst I've seen in my time in business, and I've got a lot of amethyst. I've got Zambian amethyst, which has so many problems that it takes so long just to take a big piece. They come in big pieces, and you saw them 10 times before you get to the clean areas, and so they're a lot of work. But the Rwanda amethyst just came in big chunks, clean material, and the color just unbelievable, because the amethyst has purple color, but it has secondary colors that are blue and red, and the intensity of those secondary colors is what makes the Rwanda amethyst so special. But unfortunately, it lasted 6 months. I saw 5 kilos of it, and that's all I ever saw. So I got about a kilo of it. I should have bought the 5 kilos, but you think that it's going to last, and sometimes it's one find and gone, or sometimes it is a government issue. They step in and close the mines, and so they're not available again. The other material that was found about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, was Mehandi Garnet. Mehandi is where the pink spinels come from in Tanzania, and the Mehandi Garnet was found in the same area, and they were totally unique. All my time in business, I never saw the colors that were there because they were so light. Usually garnet has a problem of being too dark, but these were light pinks, light peach colors, and just some beautiful gems. You'll see a 9-carat 45 that's on our site. That is one of the finest garnets I've ever seen. It's a peach color Malaya, and just unique. That's what I can say about it. It's beautiful and unique, and unfortunately it's all gone already. That's the nature. When you find a pocket of material, it can be either just that one pocket, or you can keep going on and keep finding more, but often they're very short-lived, so you buy all you can when you can. It's been over and over in my time in business. Peridot, 20 years ago from Pakistan, the quantity that came out was just amazing. There was tonnage. You could have bought a ton of it. Now you're lucky to buy 10 pieces of it that weigh 10 grams, so just a huge change in availability, and it's over and over again. Bicolor, tricolor tourmalines that came out of Brazil, again, a material that you could buy, you could spend all your money and there'd still be more of it, and it just seemed like it would never end, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and now you can't buy any of it. So that's just kind of the nature of the gem business, and so if you've got the money, you buy as much as you can when it comes out, and just expect that 9 out of 10 finds, it's going to be very finite.
Steve, Bigelow asks, is the shape of the final cut determined by the material? Sorry, the chat scrolled up. Is it determined by the type of material, or more so the shape of the stone? For example, are there some shapes that are only used for diamonds, or only used for other stones?
Well, it's the shape of the rough. It's what the rough shaped like. Some rough is shaped like a pencil. I mean, you can see tourmalines that are as long and thin as this. You know, so you end up cutting a long bar out of it, which I have one here that I've started and haven't finished. But this is a Indicolite Tourmaline. So its original rough was this basic shape because it actually produces the greatest yields of any stone you'll cut. You get about 60% of the original material in a piece like this. You'll get that kind of yield. Whereas a piece of apatite, you're lucky to get 30%. So if you started with a 100 carat piece of rough apatite, you end up with a 30 carat finished stone. Whereas this, if you started with 100 carat, you end up with 60 carats, just because of the nature of the rough. So what shape you end up with is somewhat by the nature of the crystal, somewhat by what's in it. Because when I start cutting, I cut out the bad stuff, which there's often a lot of stuff inside the stone that you've got to get rid of that will not produce a beautiful stone. So you cut out what's bad, look at what's left, and cut the best shape you can get out of it. There are shapes you'd rather cut. Things that are 1-to-1 proportions will be brighter, meaning rounds, trillions, square cuts, cushion cuts. The closer you are to 1-to-1 proportions, the more brilliant the cut can be. So we all like to cut squarish stones because we know they're going to be prettier. But the nature of rough doesn't allow you to do that. So you have to take each individual piece and determine individually what you're going to cut out of it. Cheap material, you can change the shape and kind of waste material. You know, you're cutting a citrine or other inexpensive material, and wasting material doesn't cost you much, so you can go for an ideal shape. You can cut a square cushion and waste an extra 20% of it, and it only costs you $30-$40 to do that. But in a Tanzanite or something more expensive, sapphires, you know, you waste 20% and you could be wasting thousands of dollars. And if you want to learn more on the cutting process, again, on YouTube, we have many videos on, well, we have a few videos on the process, the complete process of cutting gems, which we hope that some of you can actually learn from and actually start cutting stones. What do you think, Michael? Wrap it up? No, keep it up. So this is our first attempt at this, so we're learning and trying to figure out what's important to you and what you want to learn about. So if you can keep giving us questions, we'll get a better feel for what your interests are. So the other country that I hope to get back to is Madagascar. Madagascar is such a unique place. Every time you go, they're finding something new. Recently, they've discovered a new find of sapphires. Back in the early 90s, well, it was about 1997 actually, they discovered sapphire Nidelakaka in Madagascar, and it changed the the whole supply of sapphire became all Madagascar, changed the whole pricing system. Prices dropped to 30% of what they were just because of the quantity produced. They produced both blues and pinks. We're still cutting pinks that I've bought 10 years ago, and they're just beautiful gems. You know, that particular supply is pretty much played out also. Ilakaka was a desert, and all of a sudden it became a home for 20,000 miners just overnight, and it lasted for about 10 years, you know, and that was the end of production there. Still minor production, but not like it was. But other places in the country started producing, and you'll see Madagascar will produce gems for many, many years because they're very difficult to find there because of the depth of the overburden, which overburden is what covers the layer that the stones are in, which are often alluvial, and alluvial means that they were eroded from the mountain, and water spread them across a wide area. So it takes a long time to find all the sapphires. They're in one layer, but they're spread across many, many miles. So it's a long process to get to alluvial deposits. And when you have to dig down 50 feet or more, you know, the mine I go to in Ilakaka, they were down 90 feet. So you dig 90 feet of overburden before you get to the layer of sapphire, which may only be a meter wide. And that's the layer you're looking for. That's the only place you'll find the sapphire or whatever gem you're after. So.
Hi, Steve. Someone's got a question about heat treating amethyst. You understand? So he wants to know about Rwanda amethyst compared to heating different amethyst. That turns it to citrine. So I don't know if there's only the Uruguay does that, or.
Well, the question is treating amethyst as citrine, which most citrines started as amethyst, and you heat them enough, and the purple goes away, and you end up with yellow. This is true of Uruguay. All the fine amethysts we've got from Uruguay or citrine started out as amethyst. So it's only certain sources that will produce very nice colors of citrine. The Rwanda, I've tried to heat the citrine, has not been that pretty a color. Not to say that some of it will not produce great color from Rwanda, but my experience so far, and I have limited experience on producing citrine from amethyst, but my attempts so far have not been successful with Rwanda, and I haven't done much with the Uruguay. If you have a fine piece of amethyst, it has greater value than a fine piece of citrine, so we keep it as amethyst, and so my experience changing it to citrine is limited. So.
And what about heat treating topaz? Is there any treating method that will produce an intense cherry color, or is that only with irradiation?
So the question of topaz and producing a cherry color, which I have seen really fine reds with cherry color. Yeah, is that staying up there? But the only way you get a fine cherry color out of a topaz is to start with an intense color peach imperial topaz. So you're taking an extremely valuable piece of material and you're heating it, and the golden color will go away and just leave the pinks or reds. But you really have to start out with really an intense color topaz to get an intense red or pink. You know, anything that's peach color you can easily turn to pink just by heating it. You can heat it over an open flame. I've done it many times. A little risky heating over an open flame, but that kind of temperature, somewhere around 900 degrees, I believe, will produce pink out of a fine imperial topaz. But right now, imperial topaz is worth $2,000 a carat wholesale. So if you want to heat that to a pink and take the risk of damaging the stone, you know, you're a braver man than I.
And do you know any gems from
Yeah, well, you get chrome dioxide is one that comes from somewhere between Finland and Norway. Other than that, I think there's maybe some peridot, but not much from the Nordic countries. I think anything else. I'm sure there's some other things, but they've never produced a quantity of material to create a big market for anything. So somebody may find me wrong with that, but I can't think of anything. But yeah, just like the U.S., very little production, but there are some pockets of material. California has produced fine garnets from the Little Three mine and the associated mines with it, and we do get sapphire from Montana. Generally, the world, other countries produce better sapphires than you'll see from Montana, but there are some fine stones that come out of there. And of course, we did a video on mining quartz in Arkansas, which is fun for everybody because you will find a lot of quartz, and that's the fun of mining, finding something. And most mines you can go to and spend weeks and never find a thing. And some miners, my friend that's got the Tanzanite mine, he's spent the last 2 or 3 years and has not found a thing, and it's expensive mining, and so it's not always guaranteed that you'll find gems when you go digging.
Brian, he wants to know, he's a new hobbyist faceter, but he's having a hard time finding faceting rough. He wants to know if you have any recommendations where, a new faceter like himself can buy stones to cut.
Well, it is a problem for everybody. It's a problem for me. That's why I go to Africa. Finding rough to cut is very, very difficult. There's very little rough in the world. Even when I go to Africa, there's times when I'm just not finding what I need, and sometimes end up buying things that weren't quite what I'd hoped they'd be because you're forcing it. But sometimes you do get lucky. I've been to Madagascar when there's been so much material that I'm just rejecting things that now I just die to own. So right now, really, really difficult for everybody for faceting rough. What you really need to do is find out what's new finds and buy it then. There are rough dealers online that you'll find rough with. Knowing what the right price is always difficult, but just finding a good piece of rough is very, very difficult to find. I don't have specific recommendations because mostly I do buy overseas, so I don't deal with a lot of the rough dealers here in the country. But if you look enough online, I think you might find some things that'll be of interest, and but it's very, very tough at this time.
Gem shows.
Yeah, I mean, you go to Tucson, of course. Tucson would be a place where you'll find rough. Some of the bigger gem shows around the country, I know there's one in Springfield, Massachusetts, and down in Franklin, North Carolina, in July there's a show. So you really got to travel. You can't sit at home and expect it to come to you. So you got to get out and find it, and that's the only way. That's why I go to places I go to, because it's just not available generally here in the States. But at the shows you'll find some material, and as a hobbyist you don't have to buy it the cheapest. So there's generally some material to buy, and right now I'm not sure what's available. There's quite a bit of garnet. Rhodolites would be something to look for. There's quite a few countries producing it right now. So just look online and find some of the suppliers of rough and get an idea what prices should be, and take a shot at it. And it's not easy, but all you can do is keep trying at it, and or start traveling.
And Kima asks, with softer stones like apatite, is it best to polish with a hard metal lap or something softer?
So the question is what to polish softer stones on, and it varies quite a bit, just like the apatite. People that use aluminum oxide, which a lot of cutters use aluminum oxide, I use diamond. they were unable to polish apatite at all. So only the people that use diamond could actually polish it. So that's where I ended up buying a lot of rough from them, because with oxides you just can't polish it. What type of lap you use? I generally use a bat lap. Is good for most stones. Soft stones, try not to cut too many of them, but usually diamond works on most, but every stone has its polishing combination. Soft stones much more difficult than harder gems to polish. But generally you use a metal lap, or in the case of the opals, I use something very soft. These are the 3M Spectra laps. So those will work on quite a few soft stones. So that's another alternative that is a much softer lap. It's a cerium oxide lap. That's like a floppy disc. So, and these things you can look at our cutting videos too, and you'll get a little better idea of what we use. But the bat lap is generally what I use, and it's what I'll use on this apatite. And it's a hard tin lap, and I use diamond to polish.
Oni says hi.
Hi, Oni. Pavilion facets. So in general, I cut the pavilion first, which is the bottom half of the stone, and then you transfer to another dop to this end. Where am I at? And cut the other side. You can occasionally cut the other direction, cut crown first. There's sometimes a reason to do that, but generally you cut the pavilion and then the crown. So it's a two-step process that you have to transfer the stone to the opposite side. So if you haven't had a chance to see the video of the color change garnets, or alexandrite-like garnets that Michael's done, he did a great job with the video. These are some of the rarest stones that you'll ever see. I think they're probably the rarest stones in our store. The unique character of them is if you look at them in daylight or daylight fluorescent bulbs, they'll be green to blue. And then when you go to an incandescent bulb, they turn to red. So really a unique stone that does a dramatic color change. We try to get as many of these as we can. We usually end up getting 6 or 8 a year. But they're by far the rarest stone that I deal in. They're much like alexandrite. Alexandrite is the June burst stone that does the same thing. But the benefit of color change garnets, I mean, they look alike, they do the same thing, but the garnets are about 10% of the price of what alexandrite is. Even though they're many, many times rarer. The garnet is much, much rarer than an alexandrite, but they're much less expensive. And this can be explained by popularity. alexandrite is a known gem, whereas the color change garnet is unknown to everybody. Most of you probably never heard of it until now. And it's just one of those things that there's so few of the stones that there's no market for it. It takes a large quantity of stones for people to see enough of it that people start asking about it. But this is just so rare that there's no popularity, so therefore the price has stayed relatively low, although it's not an inexpensive stone. You can spend $1,500 a carat on a color change garnet, but the same stone in alexandrite is $15,000 a carat. So benefit of owning the garnet and having something that's just so rare. So take a look at that video. It's just a cool look. I mean, it's one of the most popular stones we have, but unfortunately we just rarely have them. We have a few now, but there's times we have none, or we just have low quality stones, because the best of them just, it's night and day, and it'll just make you gasp to see the difference of the colors in one stone. You know, how could that happen, you ask? And it's selective absorption, which the stones absorb particular wavelengths of light, and incandescent light has more reds, and the stone actually reflects the red color, doesn't absorb it, so you see that under incandescent. And in fluorescent lights, the colors that are dominant, if you look at daylight fluorescence, you'll see they have a blue look to them, and that's what's reflected in the color change garnet, as you would see in daylight also. And the interesting thing about garnet, if you read the books, they don't occur blue, but this type of garnet does actually occur blue. Does that show up on the screen, right? No? Okay. Where's Matt's blog at on Tanzania? Where do we find that?
Yeah, ask him if he can pull it up. He's in the chat.
If he can pull it up?
Yeah, see if he can send a link over.
Oh, yeah, Matt, can you send a link for the, I don't know, would it be the daily, about the trip to Tanzania? Matt Bigelow went with me to Tanzania. He's a great photographer, and it was just great to have him with, because I am horrible at photography, and all the trips I've taken, I have so few good pictures. But just this trip with Matt was just amazing, because somebody that really knows photography. You go to Tanzania, there's so much scenery and the gems, and just is just exciting to look at the pictures that he took. And I just wish all the trips I've taken I had him with, because you'll see in the pictures they're just interesting to look at Tanzania and the gems that are available. You know, we got pictures of the mining and buying in Tanzania, and it really give you a feel for what a trip is like when you go gem buying. Thanks, Matt. So the link will be on Tanzanite. There'll be one of the blogs. Right, Mike?
I'm going to see if I can pull it up.
Okay. We'll try and find out where that's at, because it's definitely worth taking a look at and seeing what buying in Tanzania is all about. Mehandi Garnet about the same, but no, I haven't cut alexandrites. I did get a big piece of rough from Tanzania, but it wasn't facet grade, so I can't really give you much information on cutting alexandrite.
Tell them about the zircon you cut. Somebody's asking if you cut zircon before.
Particular one?
No.
Oh, okay. Mostly I've cut zircon from Tanzania and some from Mozambique. And they're generally peach color, just a beautiful stone. Zircon's so great because it has a very high refractive index, and refractive index is what determines brilliance. A diamond is so brilliant because it has such a high refractive index. And of most of the colored stones that are available in most of the birthstones, zircon will have the highest refractive index that you'll generally buy. So it is one of the most brilliant stones. The blues look like enhanced blue diamonds. You'll have a hard time telling them apart because of the amount of brilliance it has. So the material out of Singida in Tanzania cuts a beautiful stone. They start brown. You can turn them to yellow, or you can turn them colorless. And we've sold a lot of loose stones in white zircon because when you cut them right, they look like diamond. You'll swear it's a diamond. You know, I mean, if you put them side by side, you can see diamond has a little more going on than the zircon. But the zircon really a brilliant stone and a beautiful stone. All the colors, the blues are extraordinary from Cambodia, but the peach colors that you get out of Tanzania are pretty extraordinary. They look much like imperial topaz, therefore the name we call them is imperial zircon. And I've got many of those. You know, we have stones probably up to about 15 karat in the imperial zircons, and I have a lot of material to cut that'll cut 2, 3, 4 karat size that are in the peach and yellow colors. So it is an exciting stone and one that's enjoyable to cut. It's a pretty easy stone to cut and polish, and the results is generally always good as far as the brilliance. I'm supposed to ask if anybody has any more questions out there, because we're going to wrap this up pretty quickly. But we'll try and do it again. We're going to shoot for Friday. What time are we going to do Friday? 6?
6.
It's probably about 6 o'clock Central Time. So we'll try and keep working on this and keep it interesting. And we appreciate all your questions. And if you want to join us again on Friday at 6 p.m., we look forward to seeing you here again. So take a look at what we've got. We're on MoreGems.com, TanzaniteJewelryDesigns.com, OpalLust.com, and you can go to YouTube and see all of our videos on different aspects of the jewelry industry. We've been talking about cut stones here mostly, but we do custom designing here at the store. We have a lot of unique styles because of our unique stones, and Christopher Michael is my nephew and designer, and he really does a great job on CAD. So we produce everything here. We cut the stones, we do computer-aided design, we cast it here, and we manufacture everything here. So thanks for stopping by, and we hope to see you again sometime.